We have Liesbet Geris from University Liege. She's our keynote speaker. She's going to tell us about building the virtual human twin from an engaged ecosystem to an incipient infrastructure.
So good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. It also feels a bit weird because this is oddly like you're all the experts. I'm not in the cardiology field. But so I'll try to talk about things that are not on the technical part of the matter, but that might be relevant for the community. And that's why I chose the title. So I'll first talk a bit about the engaged ecosystem and then talk about what is next and the incipient infrastructure. But first, maybe brownies. I was at a number of meetings last week for the Belgian presidency, where a lot of people, including policymakers and scientists, were always hammering on about data. We need more data, we need more data, data, and then suddenly, miraculously, this turns into advice for clinicians. And I agree, we need more data, but turning this data into actionable knowledge is not something that happens without anything, as we all know. So I started talking about the recipes to follow. And that is what I did there and what I'll talk about today. And before doing that, I'd like to go into the definition, not because you don't know what a digital twin is, but because everybody, as I've learned over the last year, has a specific definition in mind when they talk about digital twins. And sometimes this can cause issues because one person talks about digital twins as this is this thing and another person has a different meaning. So I just wanted to highlight what and then I'm talking as a group of people that have been working on this virtual human twin roadmap, what we have decided to use as a definition, just so it's clear for everyone. So this is the general definition, one of the general definitions from Industry 4.0. So you have a virtual representation of a physical object. And what is important is there is this real-time readout from the physical object that allows to model and learn and dynamically and make predictions in the virtual one, and then use these predictions to dynamically recalibrate the physical object. Now, if you apply this to healthcare, this becomes a bit difficult because this real-time readout is not something that happens in many situations, and this dynamic recalibration is even more strange if you think about predictions of diseases. There are instances like in ICU when you do glycemic control, you have sensor readout and you can immediately act upon those to have a very well-controlled level of glucose in the blood. But this is just one case, and that is a very narrow application field. So a lot of people have started using a more generic or a more general definition of digital twins, which is the use of individual-specific models for the prevention, prediction, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up of a disease, or the optimization, personalization, and selection of intervention options. So then the question becomes, how is this different from any other personalized modeling and simulation? Well, this might not be the case, but then the question is, does it really matter if we then start calling this digital twins? There was a long study done by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in the US last year on digital twins, not only in healthcare, but in other fields. And they decided that this feedback element was definitely absolutely necessary in order to call something a digital twin. But this feedback could also be through the human in the loop. So this was actually a Belgian compromise, because people that say there needs to be this feedback now have the feedback in the definition. People that say, well, in healthcare, this is not really something that works very well. They also have their broader view, because this is a clinician making a decision on a patient based on a personalized model of that patient. So everybody happy. I then want to specify that when we talk about digital twins, this is not just digital twins about cells, tissues, organs, or systems, but also about the therapies, about possible manufacturing operations, and medical facilities themselves. So all of these are digital twins of something. And then one more specification is that when building digital twins, the level of personalized information and the level of reaching the target that you want to reach with your model can differ based on the information that you have. And when you're using mechanistic models, very often you start with some kind of generic digital twin, which seems a bit of a contradiction in terms, but somewhere you build your model and you want to aim for the model to produce a result that sits within the range of values that you would expect clinically or experimentally. Then when you have more information, you can update your model and you can make it hit some specific meaningful target, like the mean or the median of a group of people's measurements. And then you can go a step further and really make it subject specific so that it quite accurately captures that person's specific measurements or outputs. Now, this is not always the way it goes. Sometimes you go from a generic twin, you make subject-specific twins, and based on that, you can build a population. Or if you're using data-driven models, you often go first to subject-specific, and then you can build something more generic from that. Just to say that all of these types of twins, when we talk about twins, I consider all of them very important. And it doesn't, for us, it doesn't really make sense to have a very narrow definition. So by now, you know that when we talk about digital twins, in the virtual human twin concept, that it is the broadest definition possible. And one more thing to add is that also based on the modeling technology, this should be inclusive. So from the AI and machine learning to the white box and everything that sits in the middle, where the things that we don't know are added by data, or where we use mechanisms to facilitate some of the data-driven technologies. So, almost done with the definition part. One last thing, when we talk about digital twins, it's actually not just the software part. The hardware part is very important because obviously we need the data, we need the sensing, we need the imaging, we need the computing infrastructure, and we also need the middleware to allow these things to connect with one another, to integrate all these different things. But today I will focus mostly on activities that have looked at the software part, so really the virtual twins, the simulations, and how we can move forward in that area. So, with all of that, starting with some of the ecosystem activities that we have been doing at the Virtual Physiological Human Institute and with the entire ecosystem. So when you look at the ecosystem, you have all these partners that play a big role with the citizens and the patients in the middle. But you go from the research top right, that's the research infrastructures or the research institutes and industry, to the infrastructure, the HPC, and on all of the research infrastructures. You have the social sciences, you have then the regulators, we're going clockwise, standardization bodies, then payers and buyers, healthcare providers, and policymakers at the top. So I'll just now want to take a few minutes to show you some of the activities that we've been doing to really build this inclusive ecosystem, to get all the people together and organize it so that the entire ecosystem is on board with what the evolutions are that are currently ongoing. And in order to do that, and I start with industry and academia, those are the easiest ones, ecosystem organizations are important. Because as an individual researcher, it's very hard to follow up everything that happens in Brussels or in your own country, and to keep track of all these policies and all these new acts that are coming out left and right. So this is not something that people tend to do, and usually what happens is that people start focusing just on the technical side of things and then want to bring it to the bedside and suddenly are confronted with a whole lot of things that they actually have no information on. The same, or vice versa, policymakers, they're sitting there, they have great ideas, but sometimes these are not really supported by some of the developments, or they have a very specific interpretation of what is happening on the field, and they talk to a few people, but that doesn't really cover the entire experience that is there. So that is why community organizations are really important. And the ones that I'm affiliated to on the left is the VPH Institute, which is the International Society for In Silico Medicine. So there we unite all non-profit organizations. We have academia, but also HTAs and hospitals. And on the right-hand side is the Avicenna Alliance, which is created a little over 5 years ago, where the VPH Institute joined forces with industry. And that is now a separate non-profit organization that also promotes in silico medicine. And one of the things that you might be more familiar with is in Silico UK. That is a task force within the Avicenna Alliance that is run by Alex Franchi, that is specifically focusing on bringing together the ecosystem in the UK. Okay, so what have we been doing with all these people together? Well, we've been talking a lot to regulators because regulatory is well, you could say it's a necessary evil, but on the other side, it is also a great way to mature your field. And by having had these conversations over the last decade or longer with people, you can really make the transition from the high-level policymakers, the regulators, down to a very specific sector or sector-specific guidances and practices and standards, down to the actual organizational level. So this conversation allows you to really understand and prepare better for the transition. And this has led to a situation that we all know that FDA especially, but also all other regulators accept computer modeling and simulation, so digital evidence as a fourth source of evidence in regulatory filings, and not just for preclinical, but also all across the entire R&D cycle, from the preclinical stage over the clinical stage, down to the real-world data and then the post-marketing phase. So the way we have been doing this, of course, FDA has been very proactive, and especially CDRH, so the medical device regulators, and the UK regulator is now following suit there. With the European Medicine Agency, it has been a bit more challenging, let's say it sometimes, to get them on board. Obviously, they have the pharmacodynamics, pharmacometrics, and all the quantitative systems pharmacology already in their portfolio, but other types of models are a bit more tricky. We have been trying though, and so we're talking a lot to them, writing white papers, trying to push from different angles. What has happened is that standards are very important there as well. You think they're recently, in 2018, we had the American Society of Mechanical Engineering, the VV40, that came out. It was really the first standard for modeling and simulation in medical devices, but that's by far not the only one. So if you go to fairsharing.org and you look for the EDIT collection, you see that there are 149 guidances and standards that are related to modeling and simulation, to digital twins in some way, shape, or form. So either they talk about the data and how to standardize it, or they talk about some aspects of modeling, because there are different guidances that already have bits and pieces of modeling and simulation in them. So all of this has been quite a work. So there's lots of information, but it's not always very easy to find it. And that is why we thought as a community that there was one good practice missing, which is the good simulation practice. As a point of, a first point of contact for anybody that wants to do modeling and simulation, to find all the information in a way that is comprehensive and that is accessible, that outlines what are the responsibilities of the different people involved in simulations in healthcare. And that is why we started drafting a white paper to entice organizations that have the power to do so to consider writing a good simulation practice. This was something that was done through a grassroots movement in the in Silico World Community of Practice Slack channel, where we used the good clinical practice as a basis, and we really started discussing what is the role of so the credibility analysis, what is the role of the sponsor, what is the role of the modeler or the tech developer, what is the role, if any, for ethical committees. And we as their academia, industry, but also HTAs, the social scientists and regulators, they were a very active part. So this ended up growing a bit outside of a white, or becoming way bigger than a white paper. So it turned into a book, actually, and FDA reviewed each chapter and wrote the foreword. And this ended up being the good simulation practice. So this is a free ebook that you can download. That doesn't contain all of the information, but it does contain the large overview and some concepts, and it sends you on your way to further details if you need them. What we're doing now is try to figure out how we can get this from a suggestion, that is towards to give it really a home and make it really a good practice. Okay, but that was the standardization and the regulators. When we talk about then healthcare providers, there are still, well, there are, of course, and we will hear from them, people that are very active in silico medicine and computer modeling and simulation in healthcare. That is not a problem. It is sometimes a problem to reach other people, and especially to understand what it is what language we best should use, or what it is that they expect, what they want, what they fear, what they don't know. And so in order to get a better handle on this, we did a survey a couple of years ago to really map the use of computer modeling and simulation, but also to assess the level of acceptance and of knowledge of this within the clinical community. And what came out, if we put this into a SWOT analysis, is, of course, yes, people are using it, but then there is awareness that this exists, and the people that have good contacts, they have a way of introducing this into their clinical practice. However, this is not always, for those who don't have that direct contact with a tech developer, this seems to be a bit more difficult, or difficult not only to access, but also to understand or to know how to incorporate it. And that is then not counting the financial side of trying to understand how you can have a modeler in your team, or how this otherwise should happen. Now, one factor that I would like to highlight is that trust. Trust is seen as a strength because people who use it, they trust it. It's also an opportunity. People are willing to trust, to put their trust in, but they're also afraid to put their trust where it shouldn't belong. So how do we, that's a very important aspect in communication that we're developing now. How do you assess modeling and simulation? What should you know about it? And how do you explain to clinical collaborators as tech developers, how do you explain what they should be, what questions should they ask? A bit like when you have a new PhD student coming into the lab, reading papers from biomedical sciences, they see a PCR, a Western blot, and they just take it at face value. But you have to train them so that they know what things they need to actually pay attention to in order to see for themselves, to judge for themselves whether this is a reliable piece of data. Doesn't mean that you need to know everything about PCR or Western blot, but you can teach them how to evaluate this data in its own right. So this is something that we have done, that we're working on building educational material for. And we've recently reopened the survey, and I'll have a link to that at the end of my slide deck to ask for your collaboration to spread it. Now, very important, obviously, also is to look at the citizens and the patients. And there we've been running a wide range of focus groups with different projects, so focusing on different applications, different countries, different patients that we put together with clinicians, without clinicians. And there again, what we did was we used simplified scenarios where we took actual projects, actual products, and we translated into a story that we presented to the patients, and then we had a discussion on just anything that came in across their mind to understand what it is that they don't know, what they do know, how they perceive things, and what they were afraid of and what they expected. And there again, trust was very important. So social acceptance and trust is really a key word. And trust is not the same as trustworthiness. So it's not enough that a tech developer says, yes, we did credibility analysis, you can trust this, the regulator approved it, it's all A-okay. It's the same with the clinicians. Yes, this is trustworthy, but does it work for me? Does it work in my hands? Can I do something with it? And what I get out of it, do I trust this? There is this additional level that is really important. And with a lot of patients, for them, the role of the clinician was very important. So if the clinician is there and they put their trust in these technologies, then they are willing to do so, even if they don't understand it very well. There's also the other side, of course, that patients come with new technologies, with the in silico models, or with digital healthcare tools that they then want to present. And there, this conversation is really important with clinicians. We developed a whole bunch of educational videos. So on the VPHI YouTube channel, every month there will be a new video, and in total there will be a series of 10 that in very short clips of 2 minutes will explain the basic concepts of in silico medicine. And these have all been talked through with patient organizations in order to make sure that they were very much understandable. Now, all of this information that comes from the past 4 years of work that has been done with a large group of people in the community, we're putting this together in an info kit where we have all of the different materials that we developed, all of the different guidances, so how to do a Delphi survey, how to do a large clinical survey, how to do a focus group, how to do your RRI workshop with your collaborators. All of this and all of the material that we developed in order to run all of those will be in this info kit that everybody can use to do these kinds of activities with their own patient groups, with their own clinical collaborators, so that people can actually, that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel in the community, but that we can take these learnings and do them at multiple places. So this brings me to the last one, which is the policymakers. And this is where we, as the VPH Institute, try to have yearly conversations with the people in Brussels to inform them of where the field was going. And as you know, with politics, it's never easy. There are waves. So there was a wave early in the 2000s where modeling and simulation received funding and was very popular. And then somehow people moved on, other people were replaced, and there was a bit of a lull in the funding. So we really tried to build these personal relations to inform people of where the field was. And again, these conversations that we had with regulators and the regulatory science of in silico medicine really helped to show that this was not just some academic exercise, but that we were serious about bringing this forward and that the field was really maturing. So in one of these conversations 2.5 years ago, suddenly they started asking questions about the integrated digital twin. And so the one version of a model. So when were we going to build this one digital twin of the entire human body? We were a bit taken aback because that wasn't really something that we were working on. We were trying to get all the small applications to have a precise question of interest and context of use and take that to the patient. And suddenly there we had to start thinking about how to put this all together. But okay, this was where they were going. So I thought, let's, if the European Commission is going in this direction, let's try to take the momentum and make sure that we turn it into something that is actually of use for the entire community. So last year in December, the European Commission officially inaugurated what they call the virtual human twin. At the occasion of the inauguration of the new supercomputer in Barcelona. And what they see this is as their next flagship program, that's the words that they used, to build and accelerate personalized care for citizens and patients through the use of modeling and simulation. So their definition was that a virtual human twin is an integrated multi-scale time and discipline representation of the whole body that can characterize its pathophysiology, and that is used for patient-specific predictions, as I already mentioned before. Now, this gives the impression that we are building one twin. And usually when I present this, then people are like, yeah, right. This is never going to happen. But what is important, I think, is this integrated part. You don't need to integrate into the whole body, but integrating between different scales, integrating between different organ systems, that is something that's already done. So all of these pictures are examples of what is out there in the literature. So this happens. But there are still a lot of these multi-scale models, and cardiology, of course, is, or the cardiovascular sciences are way ahead of many of the other fields. But there are still learnings that are not shared. So people reinventing the wheel when they talk about, when they try to put different levels together. So there are things that we can actually learn from one another and that we can make more broadly accessible in order to accelerate our development. And this is why within this, the EDIT project, we went for a more pragmatic definition, which is that it should be a systematic and ever-growing digital and quantitative representation of the actionable knowledge that we have, but that this platform, because that is what they want to build, a platform should allow the pooling of resources and assets. So, and by that I mean models, data sets, but also any algorithm, compute power, storage networks, the whole lot, to help develop digital twins and assess their credibility. Okay, we just don't want a whole heap of digital twins that do nothing. We also need to facilitate people doing the credibility analysis, because that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's not a trivial task. But again, there are things that can be learned, workflows that can be shared. So this is the idea behind that. And this should then lead to a federated public infrastructure. And why federated? Because there are a lot of infrastructures already available. There are a lot of things that already exist, like the biomodels database, that do not need to be duplicated, but that need to be connected to. And this infrastructure should allow this collection of resources, and it's very important that this is driven by a collaborative ecosystem. So this is the definition that we took, and we is in this case the consortium of the EDIT coordination and support action. That is the typical way if the European Commission wants to go into a new direction, or if they want to revitalize a direction, that they write out a coordination and support action, where typically a roadmap is being written that will set out where the field is going and how to go there over the next decade. Of course, it is then understood that this provides information to them that they can use in defining further funding calls. So the EDIT CSA was a bit particular in the sense that, of course, yes, there was building the ecosystem, writing the roadmap, but we also have to deliver a proof of concept of the infrastructure, a proof of concept of the repository, and propose an architecture for the simulation platform. So this was a bit particular. The first thing that we did, because you see, well, from the partners, these are different universities. There are also university hospitals. There are different expertises represented, from the AI to the more mechanistic modeling. There's also representation of industry, of infrastructure people, of the HPC centers. So I think we managed to get a representation of the entire ecosystem, but we still, the first thing we did was actually go talk to a lot of people, and especially industry and clinicians, to understand what the value proposition of such an infrastructure should be. Because if we build, or if the European Commission built something like this, and they were going to build it because they had already foreseen a budget, then we better make sure that it is useful for everyone, because otherwise it's just another, very expensive, if it would be a physical thing, a paperweight, but it's so then it would sit there somewhere and not be used. Yeah, and that would be, I think, the one shot as a community that we would get. There would be no chance that 5 years down the line we would be able to go there and say, now we're ready for this infrastructure, so can you please give us the money again? So we want to make sure that whatever it is that is being built can actually be used. So we talked to industry, medtech, software, pharma, big companies, small companies, to try and understand what they would see useful in a public infrastructure like that. And of course, it differs based on who you're talking to, what organization you talk to, and also who in the organization you talk to. But in general, these 7 points that you see on the left were the ones that came back all the time. If there is a public infrastructure, then we are interested in using the resources that are inside this infrastructure. We're interested in using it as a sandbox or as a benchmark for our own developments. If an infrastructure usually stimulates the development of new technology that we can incorporate, but it also stimulates the clarification and of some of the concepts in ethical, legal, and social issues, like liability, like IP management, all of these things. Whatever is clear for public infrastructure is also more clear for the private one that they might have. And then, of course, there's the networking part, finding new partners, finding new economic opportunities. When talking to clinicians, again, there it depends on where they are, exactly how much they're investing in training, or how they're very much on the day-to-day side, or they're clinician researchers. So virtual patients, hypothesis testing, clinical decision support, investigating comorbidities, all of these elements are there. But then this, with the important remark that data and annotation, integration and clinical workflows, all of these are important in order for this to actually work in a clinical setting. I will skip the next 2 slides because these are SWOT analyses. I'm very happy to talk to anyone. It's too much text, and I think I'll rather spend my time talking a bit more about what we think the virtual human twin infrastructure could look like. So if we look at the infrastructure, the idea would be that from wherever you are, you can access the catalog, find data, find resources, find models based on a reference anatomical framework using specific terms from a agreed upon metadata schema or taxonomy. You should be able to access these digital twins, and especially those that have been funded by the European Commission, but everybody else that is willing to share their resources can, of course, put them there and can make them accessible. You should be able to find matching. If you have a data set and you want to have a model, or if you have a model, you want to find a data set, those kind of searches should be able to happen. And you should be helped by the infrastructure to find the right compute the resources. There is still an underuse of HPC resources by a lot of researchers. So a lot of people are still running it very locally, whereas they could easily access the HPC facilities. But there is a threshold. There is it's not always easy to get all of this started. So the idea would be that all of these HPC centers who are involved in virtual human twin also invest in making these matches, finding the right infrastructure and getting the resources that are needed to get them to make them available to people using the platform. You should be able to orchestrate your digital twin, so put things together. If you want to integrate multiple scales or if you want to integrate different organ systems, this should be allowed. And then in the end, you should be able to script everything. Just build a workflow, make that workflow available, or take everything out of the infrastructure, if that is allowed by all of the different components, and build this into a standalone application that you can take further for regulatory approval. This infrastructure is not going to get regulatory approval in its whole thing. So if you really want to take something to the patient, then you need to start building this in a separate way. In order to do that, we require a lot of work, and obviously there is a technology aspect of it. So the individual resources, the connection between all these resources, the APIs, the infrastructure, the hardware, but that's not all. There is also the ethical, legal, and social issues that need to be addressed. So data access, privacy, code of conduct, regulatory considerations, the standardization, all of this, the social aspects and trust. There's the user perspective. Who will be using this? What is it that they need? How can they use it? How can we interface with other platforms so that you don't go there and you need to have 25 different logins for all the different research infrastructures, but that there is a streamlining that is happening there. And then there is a sustainability aspect, and not sustainability as in terms of the green sustainability, which is of course also very important, but the uptake of it by these users. So the clinical uptake, the uptake by companies, and all the possibilities of adding business or economic activities on top of these kind of infrastructures, and also then the incorporation into a European research infrastructure itself. And just to say that every word, of course, on this slide means, again, a whole heap of work. If I mention the word integration, then this can mean the integration of models at different levels, different organ systems, which some might require a very tight coupling. So that means that you need to take them out, put them into one model, and put them back into the system. Or if they're very loosely coupled, then you can do orchestrated data streams going from one level to the next. There's also the integration of different data types, and then the integration of models and data, and especially in those cases where they're not co-located. So then either you have to replicate the data to where the model is, or containerize the model and bring it where the data is. So for all of these, a lot of work is already being done, and a lot of things already exist, but it's not always made very much available, or the access to these tools is not always so very easy. Now, there are also a lot of research infrastructures already that you can see here, and especially the ones in the life sciences, which are clustered in the life sciences RI, so the LSRI. And this is something where we believe that a virtual human twin infrastructure can really add value, because a lot of those are actually focusing on the data part. So of the brownie, they're focusing on the basic ingredients, but not all of them are or in fact very few, are actually focusing on the recipe and how to build the basic ingredients into a brownie. So we believe that the virtual human twin infrastructure could really be an added value there. So how did we start by building this proof of concept infrastructure? Well, when we were writing the grant, we selected a number of use cases that were based on ongoing work and other projects. And it's not so important what are the details, but if you go into the columns, the way we selected them was to cover a wide range of different types of modeling technologies, from multi-scale, agent-based, data-driven, different types of data that went into them, different types of compute requirements, and different types of integration possibilities and users that were targeted, to have a wide overview of possibilities that would be requiring to be integrated into the infrastructure. And these were analyzed, the technical part of it, the workflows, but also the legal situation. If I have data in Italy and I want to use them and I want to use a Polish supercomputer center, how does that work with GDPR? How does that work with all of the acts that are now in vogue are now active in Europe? So all of those aspects were considered, and based on that, a proof of concept was proposed. And what you see here is a very high level representation of that, with the very typical parts that you see at the bottom right in the green. That is the provider's part. So you put your stuff in there. You need to follow a certain taxonomy, a certain metadata schema. You need to indicate information on where your resource is coming from, what it does, the credibility of the resource. How do we value that? So is it something that the user indicates, or is there a way to let the system indicate a level of credibility? There is the pinkish part, which is the admin part, so user access, the curation. And then there is on the left the yellow part where there is the catalog. So for the users that want to come and want to search resources, this is the way that they can do this based on this reference anatomical framework. Now this then, if you see here in the middle to the right, there is this green arrow to the simulation platform. The simulation platform was not something we had to build, but you cannot really separate the catalog and the repository from the simulation platform, because if you just build a repository and then afterwards you need to go and build a simulation platform, there are certain choices in your repository that are actually dependent on what you want to do with them in the simulation platform. So we also built a small proof of concept of this simulation platform, which has the typical layers with the front end, where you have the visualization tools and the dashboards. There are the second layer are the field-specific services. So what are the different things that we want to do with all of these resources? There is the middleware with the workflow management, the access, the federation, and there is then the infrastructure as a service layer, or the HPC, the connection to HPC. And this is something that currently, when the final stretch for the actual tender of the platform. So the European Commission has foreseen 24 million to build this platform. The actual version, so the VHT platform, we're only doing the proof of concept EDIT platform. And the deadline for that is the 7th of June. Reading these documents, I mean, I think also all of you are more used to reading European calls, which are like 1 page, 2 page, where they give some requirements of what needs to be done in the grant. But this is quite different. So there are 100 pages of requirements that this platform needs to do. So it's a very different ballgame, but yeah, we'll see where this ends up. We're trying to make sure that everything that we've learned in this whole process of the roadmap gets pushed into those developments. So how did we, the final bit is, how did we go about with the roadmap? Well, we went through 3 phases, or we are going through 3 phases. First, there was the design phase, because we were required by the European Commission to deliver this roadmap by the first draft of the roadmap by July last year, which was 10 months into the project. We had to follow a bit of a particular approach. So we did a lot of work within the consortium with all of these different experts that we talked to. And we tried to make sure that we covered all elements of the ecosystem. We wrote a first draft of this roadmap and made it available publicly for writing. We had numerous meetings and everybody could access and just put their comments in. This resulted into this first draft that you can consult and online, and I didn't really have any expectations, but it had over now 2,100 people downloading this. It's not an easy read. Our goal was to not, well, we didn't intentionally make it difficult to read. We just were more worried about it having all of the elements there that we felt needed to be in the final roadmap. Okay, so we went into the technical, the LC, the user, the sustainability, listing things that we felt really needed to be there, in some cases more in detail than others. To make it a little bit easier, we had this interactive map at the beginning, if you go to the PDF document, where we go from the bottom left, which is the concepts that we have at present, the vision for the virtual human twin, then up to the top right, which is the future development and implementation, how this can work in practice for the different user groups. And so for each of those, we describe what is already available, what might be some strategic choices that need to be made, how we can actually build a platform like that. Now we are in the second phase, or wrapping up, close to wrapping up the second phase, which is the develop phase, where we quickly realized that this 100-page document was maybe interesting for people more with a technical background, but it didn't really work very well in terms of engaging people that did not have that background. So there was a 2-page version of it, which detailed in 1 page what is the concept of the virtual human twin, and then what are some of the things that really need to be worked on. And this is any combination of virtualhumantwins.eu.org.ai, you can find it. This, we asked different organizations to sign it, but not just individuals, really at the C level or at the level of the directorate, whether they could sign this. So you see that there are quite a lot of organizations, big organizations, small ones, academia, industry, patient organizations, they all signed this. And why is this important? It is because we have elections coming up, and then things might change. You know, I explained that we had these waves of interest into this field. They now have this platform tender that is out, so that's a definite investment. They have a lot of projects that they are funding right now, but whenever they're asked about, they being the European Commission, whenever they're asked about what is the future that they foresee, they're like, nah, you know, let's first see what these projects do. So we felt that we needed a bit more certainty. And this is a great way also for them internally to make sure that if people change, at least there is a very clear message of the ecosystem of companies that they find very important, universities that they find very important, that say that this is something that you should keep investing in. So it's not something I ever thought I would be doing, this kind of lobbying or salesmanship when I was studying mechanical engineering, but you know, there we are. And I can understand the value of something like that. So we are also further developing policy recommendations on the LC side, but also on the funding side, trying to promote buy-in by establishing the joys of being in Europe and a member state strategy. Because of course, something like this can never be just funded top-down. This needs to be bottom-up. And that is why it is also very important to have a roadmap with a shared vision that is carried by the entire ecosystem, where we can really say, okay, where we can agree on sometimes, you know, it's maybe not silly is the wrong word, but things that might not seem super important, but if we agree on a common vision on what is important, metadata schemas, ways to interoperate, then you can create harmonization by design or interoperability by design, because then there is the broad vision. People can read this, and in every small project that you are doing that is funded by your research organization, you can adhere to some of these guidelines and then make it interact with everything that is going on. So rather than have one, you know, flagship program, $1 billion project that will then do all of this and not be as inclusive, we can try to build it also bottom up if we have this shared vision. And so that's also the incentive mechanisms that are very important to make sure that there is something, everybody can get something out of it by making this available. So all of this we're now trying to put down in recommendations for the VHT, and this is a very, very abbreviated schematic representation. But the idea is to really present in the roadmap a clear view on how this might be realized. So what do we see in the next 10 years? What are the low-hanging fruits? What are the things that require a longer window of investment in order to really come to fruition? And what might be gradual steps that we can take. And of course, the idea there is that this it's not written in stone. Technology develops sometimes and takes us by surprise. But this is a possible way of going towards this virtual human twin. And if the Commission is really serious about calling it their flagship program, well, then there might be the ways in which they want to support it. So for us, it's now really important to make sure that this represents the entire ecosystem. So if you have a very specific idea of what should be done in the future, you're very welcome to help to help us write this, because we're actually, if I have to go back now, in the public writing of this second draft, and this will end by our Amsterdam meeting, which is mid of July. After which we try to consolidate everything that we have and go for validation. So public endorsement, but also specific advisory boards for the political endorsement and patient endorsement as well. So if you have something to say about what I showed you, then these are some of the things that you might consider doing, if I can be so bold. There is, I mentioned the clinical survey at the beginning. There is another one open. So I'd be happy to share the link with you if you want to circulate this in your field. There is also a clinical working group that some of you are already part of, that we use to really make sure that what is written into the roadmap covers the clinical concerns and needs. There is a manifesto. So if your organization wasn't on that slide with all the logos, then there is a page on the website where you can sign up. But please remember that this needs to be, you can do the signing up, but you need your rectors or your CEOs or CTOs approval for this. If you have a use case, if you have data sets, or if you have a resource, algorithms that you developed that you want to make available, and you don't really have a home for it, you can put it on your Git, but you can also send it to us on the EDIT website, and then we can incorporate it into the proof of concept repository. And then there is the final thing, so the roadmap writing. Again, there is the first draft that you can find, but if you go to the website, there is a tab roadmap where you can click and you find the link to the Google Doc. You can browse around, but you can also leave your comments. And if you leave your name with your comments, then you'll be incorporated into the writership or into the contributors list of the roadmap. And then finally, if you haven't anything to do yet on the 15th and 16th of July and you're not on holiday, then you might consider joining the final ecosystem meeting in Amsterdam, where we will have a series of strategic sessions with people, for instance, from FDA, from clinics, from the social side, discussing different elements of the VHT. We will have interactive breakout sessions and also an interactive plenary session to reach consensus on the recommendations that we want to put into this roadmap. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for a really nice talk. And we have about 10 minutes for questions. Anybody wants to, I can start with a question. So is there a similar work group in the US that you guys are interacting with?
There is in the IMEC group, so that's a group, I think, at the interface of NIH and NSF, if I'm not mistaken, that was that Grace Pang is chairing, and they're looking into digital twins and specifically focused more on the immune side. There's also recently a call from FDA, NSF, and NIH on digital twins. So yes, they're doing this, but they don't not this kind of bottom-up writing of roadmaps kind of thing. They had the study by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, So it's a bit of a different way of going about it, but they're also looking at digital twins, not building this research infrastructure.
It's nice. And the for example, when in the website when you have you can include models, for example, or things like that. Is there a particular way of how you curate the models, or use other things that, for example, SLML, things like that already exist?
For those where community standards exist, yes, that is the easiest way to do so. And there is a whole chapter on different standards and also an implementation guide for those. The problem is with some of these physiology-based models and also the agent-based models, there are no such standards yet. So that's a whole other discussion that is ongoing, which we don't need to solve in this roadmap, but this is something that the platform needs to be cognizant of and needs to monitor and try to stimulate to coming together. But there, for instance, there are also in the US some initiatives on trying to see how one agent-based software turns into the other between Physicell, I think, and CompuCell 3D. There is a project that really looks at those things and tries to extract some generic rules from that. So yes, for where there is a community standard, they're to be used. When they're not, there's a discussion also with people from ISO committees on how we should standardize these things that are going to be very difficult to standardize. So rather than maybe standardize the technology, we should make sure that the input and the output are standardized and that there are clear ways of doing credibility analysis if you cannot standardize everything that is in between, let's say.
Yes, Gernot.
Hi, Gernot Bachmann here. So this is very interesting, but very ambitious, technically hugely challenging, and the risk is that you will not deliver on that.
Yes.
It's a real risk.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of that. So I'm long enough in the field now. I've seen similar projects. So Gary, you may remember National Grid Service, building grid middleware and so on. Whenever academia tries to build a platform like that, it usually doesn't end that well. There are services around. Amazon Web Services, I think, would be ideal for implementing that and probably feasible. Sure, in academia we want control, everything should be freely accessible. Amazon Web Services might be very expensive, but is it really the most cost-economic way of implementing a platform like that through a public approach like that? I'm just...
No, I'm 100% with you. As I mentioned in the beginning, this was not a bunch of academics that came together and thought, let's build this thing and propose it to and sell it to the European Commission. This was actually the European Commission that said, let's do this thing and write out the calls. And so we're trying to make sure that since they're building it, that it turns into something that at least can be used. So it's a bit of a different approach here. If you look at the requirements, they want this to be a public infrastructure, and that is problematic because there are indeed solutions that exist. There are also companies that offer these kinds of platforms already that, by the public nature of it, are almost, have decided not to participate in the tender because they have a product and they will have to give up control of that. So it is going to be very tricky to make sure that this investment that they are going to do, and there was no talking them out of it, that it will become something that is useful. And that is why we've spent all this time talking to different stakeholders to try and understand what it is that they want to see and how they might potentially see interoperability. Talking to AWS, they're not involved in this, but they are always willing to be used as kind of a test case for interoperability. So they are monitoring this and they see an added value between their services and a public infrastructure. So that is, I think, this moment the best that we can do. If this thing is going to happen, then build it in such a way that it can interoperate and that it can try to, that we tone down the expectations of building this one integrated twin and make sure that we focus on helping people build their stuff and do credibility analysis. Because there are a lot of projects that come out, and then when the project funding stops, that the software just disappears, right? So there are also a lot of projects that build their own platform. So there is a there is a case to be made for having something that is already there so that these projects can plug into this. And that was maybe different 10 years ago when there was less still available and there were less of these regulatory science tools already available. So I think we're in a different situation now. There is some added value, but it is a tricky situation. I completely agree.
Well, I see the political angle of it. Like all the important infrastructure is based in the US.
Yeah.
The US is based. There's something matching in Europe would be great. The way to getting there, like when they started Airbus, it worked out. I think this is too tiny of an investment. At the end, you have to compete with Amazon Web Services, and this you're fighting a giant. Even the companies involved are tiny. So it's David against Goliath.
Yes, and especially when they say we have a lot of budget foreseen, and then actually, if you look at what they ask versus the budget that they foresee, it's
not realistic.
It's peanuts, yeah. It's not realistic. But the people that are building it, or the companies, the consortia that are now looking at building it, they see this as an investment because they think there will be more.
Any other questions? How would you, for people that are starting, the young investigators, how do you think it can actually help into this? Bring some help into this discussion?
I think it will be an environment where they can find, if it's up and running, the way it is foreseen to be up and running, it is a way to provide assistance without having to go to all kinds of different places and by accident discover really interesting tools at conferences or when talking to people. This should be a place where they are more centralized so that you have a better place to go look for these things. If there are multiple models you want to do your cardiac model or a model in another field that is not so dense, that you can go and see what is already available and then either use something that is there or build your own, but at least you know what is already available. It's a bit like the biomodels database, but biomodels is just for the CellML or for the CellML models. So.
Yeah, I really admire the effort that's involved in collecting all this information and building all these partnerships, and I think it's incredible. Well done. And I just wanted to ask if you had been thinking about the way that the industry seems to be becoming a compute-based economy, similar to an oil-based economy, a century ago, and how, as a community, we can kind of reconfigure ourselves to take advantage of maybe the economics of that and try and make it, I guess, facilitate the compute aspect of what we do into healthcare.
Okay, just that I understand your question. How we can use this momentum? No, can you maybe reformulate? Just
it's an analogy that I've been hearing a lot recently, in that compute resources are starting to be the
commodities.
The basis of everything. So looks like you're facilitating links between different partners in terms of how to use compute, in terms of making it more efficient and also more accessible.
Yes.
And are you thinking in terms of that economics as well?
Yes, but it's absolutely, but it's very hard to find actual numbers. I just had a long discussion with colleagues from industry. There is, at this moment, adding tech will add cost. So using that argument, it's very hard to show how this will decrease cost. It should increase accessibility. It should increase the quality for individual patients. It should increase the quality of care. So there is benefits, but not necessarily cost reductions that we can describe. So the economics of it, there are specific fields looking at digital health economics. I think there was a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago on this element and the specific role of platforms in this. So this is something that is not my area of expertise, but that we're looking at. It's very hard to quantify all of this, so it remains a bit descriptive at the moment.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Axel Löwe from Karlsruhe. You mentioned that it will be crucial that this repository is actually being populated with models, with data, and so on, and you also mentioned incentives for that. Can you elaborate a bit on how you envision to incentivize people?
So I now realize I forgot to say the EDIT the coordination support action runs until the end of this year. It was a 2-year project, but then the platform, by the end of this year, there should already be the first tender out, where they should take over this repository. But for instance, we've discussed this also quite a bit with the people of the 12 Labors project, so Peter Hunter's project, that you can facilitate access to all of these VVUQ resources. That is an incentive. If your model is there, that you can use these workflows that are already on the platform, that you can help build communication tools or didactical tools based on your model. So there's ways to help do the communication or to provide some interesting tools. You can, because you upload stuff there, you can use other things that are there. So in the first instance, it will be just purely voluntary, but at some phase, it might be more of a token type of platform use. So there, if you contribute, you can also use. There is an example of a group of physicians in Germany, in ICU, that went through the trouble of annotating data sets, putting them in a catalog with the specific aim of researchers using this catalog and then including those researchers as co-authors into their publications. So there is all kinds of scientific, but also other incentives that you could think about to entice people to use it.
Great. So we reached the time for the coffee break. So let's thank Liesbet one more time for